local ghost legend you'd like to share, send it to lex@anythingghost.com. Got a handful of stories for show number 234, plus I'm going to read one story from my book that just came out last year. So stick around for number 234. Here's a story from Thom and Zuzana in Columbus, Ohio. Curious incidents on Lathrop Street. We've had a few odd experiences. Maybe they have non-paranormal explanations, but we like to think there may be something going on around here. My girlfriend and I live in a small cottage house on the outskirts of the German village near downtown Columbus, Ohio. Most of the houses in the area are old. Ours was built in the 1890s. The house creaks and groans constantly, and it never ceases to be at least a little moody. There's a tall wood fence that encloses the small property. Part of the fence is a heavy wood gate that bangs rhythmically when it's windy. It's just the two of us at the house and our two dogs. One of our neighbors has shared a story with us about a man who lived in a long-gone shack somewhere on the block. This man allegedly hung himself in the shack and now haunts the block, wandering from yard to yard and house to house. We think we caught his ghost on camera one evening after a date. We recently acquired an old classic car and had just taken it out for our date. When we returned, I got out my phone, hoping for a cool nighttime picture of the car. We were in the alleyway that runs alongside our house. I snapped maybe a half a dozen pictures. When reviewing them, we found a large green orb. It was particularly odd, because when I took the pictures, I was standing in one spot, and the pictures were of the same area. The orb appeared in a different place in each picture. In the first, it appeared further away from the car, clearly between us and the car. In the last, it was clearly between us and the car. We could find no obvious explanation for its appearance. The more interesting stories took place within our home, before we adopted our second dog. The house is open, essentially one room, with the living room space at the front of the house, the dining room in the middle, and the kitchen in the rear. The back door is in the kitchen and opens up onto a deck and a small yard where our dog, Pilot, plays and does his business. I need to mention that one of the first things we did when we adopted Pilot was to train him to ring a set of bells when he needs to do his business. These bells hang on a doorknob on the back door. We spend most of our evenings at the front of the house in the living room watching television, our backs to the dining room and kitchen. One evening, my girlfriend and I were particularly tired. Zuz works long hours, and at the time I was working full-time and going to school full-time. Like most evenings, we could not get out of our work clothes and into our pajamas fast enough. We had just sit down in the living room to eat dinner and watch television when we heard Pilot's bells jingle. It was a good, confident jingle. He needed out. No delay. With all the energy I could muster, I turned and asked Zeus if she would let Pilot out. She gave me a strange look. I was sure she was going to decline and insist I handle it. Instead, she replied, "Pilot's right here." She leaned back to reveal him sitting next to her on the couch. As confidently as I was able, I ventured to the kitchen to investigate. There was no clear explanation for the bell jingling. A year later, we were spending time in the living room when I heard a loud thud come from the kitchen. We both hopped up to investigate and found a wine bottle rolling down the floor. Our small wine rack was kept in an open cabinet a couple feet above the sink. It appeared as though the bottle had fallen down some 6 feet from the rack to the floor and missed the sink on its way down. all without breaking. There was no clear explanation for how the bottle came to be on the floor or why it had not broken. About that same time, Pilot began acting very strangely. He was 6 or 7 years old at that time and had been a part of the family since he was 7 weeks old. He spent almost all of his time with us, wherever we went in the house. If we were watching television, he would be right there with us in the living room. If we were cooking, he would be in the kitchen. If we were sleeping, he was on the bed. One evening, when we were again in the living room watching television, Pilot hopped up, obviously spooked, and ran out of the room. We found him hiding under the dining room table. No amount of coaxing could get him to come out. I had to pull him out physically and hold him tightly to keep him with us in the living room. If I let go of him, he would immediately run back and hide under the table. We were sure he would join us for bed. He did not. I was so worried about him that I slept under the table with him that night. At that time, I worked in a dog-friendly office. Pilot came to work with me every day. His behavior was totally normal at the office, but as soon as we returned home, he was back under the table. This went on for a few days before we took him to the vet to make sure his health was okay. The vet had no explanation for his behavior. We got him one of those therapy vests and a special scent diffuser to help calm him down. Thankfully, after another week, he returned to his normal behavior. A couple stories from Scott in Texas, Haunted Hollywood Hills, and My Passenger.
During my trip to LA back in 2005, I decided to go on a ghost tour. We wound our way through the Hollywood Hills, much to the protests of my stomach, which had taken in some hot, spicy pasta and some wine about an hour before. At one point, our duteous and rather dubious driver stopped at the side of the road and told us we could get out and have a look around. We did. I walked a few yards and looked south to see the Los Angeles Valley stretched out before me. The city was covered in a thick blanket of fog, and it added to the etherealness of the night. As I looked out upon the fog-enshrouded city, a mother and her preteen daughter stood next to me, and the little girl said, "Mommy, I don't like it here. Can we go?" The mother said everything would be okay, but the girl was adamant. "Something bad is here. Let's go." The mother said it was just her imagination. At this point, I spoke up and said, "I believe your daughter is quite correct. I feel it too." There was a heaviness in the area, as if the very air which surrounded us was negatively charged. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded with a look of uncertainty in her eyes. We went back to the van, and when we were all gathered around the guide, he told us that we now stood in front of the gate, which once led to the residence of Roman Polanski and his then-wife Sharon Tate. I heard another tourist mutter, "Jesus." We left that place and went up around the hill to the former estate of Rudolph Valentino, Falcon's Lair. Not long afterwards, we wound our way back into the city. I had begun to sweat and was feeling slightly nauseous. As we entered West Hollywood, I told the guide to stop and let me out. "But we still have 3 more places to go." I told him I was about to be sick, so he let me out. As I walked the rest of the way to my hotel, I lost my dinner in some bushes. Was it just the hills and the winding roads that we drove through, or was it something else? My passenger. When on road trips, I'm usually looking at the road or the scenery going by while talking with Carrie, my girlfriend, or listening to music on my iPhone. Yesterday morning, while in New Orleans, I checked out of the Wyndham Hotel early so as to get a jump on the traffic. I was awake and alert while driving, and concentrating on the drive ahead of me. Not long after leaving the vicinity of New Orleans and going through the wetlands of Louisiana, I became aware of a presence in my car. In the peripheral vision of my right eye, I saw a young woman. She had long, wavy black hair and was wearing big, round sunglasses, kind of like the type that were in style back in the 1960s. Picture Jackie Onassis. When I looked right at her, she would be gone. She never looked at me, but only at the road ahead. She never said a word, even when I spoke to her. Talking to a ghost. Instead of continuing on I-10, I took a right turn onto 96 in Beaumont and then a left on 105. From that point on, I never saw her again. I am left wondering who she was and why she chose to ride with me out of New Orleans in the middle of the night.
2 stories from Liz in Melbourne, Australia. In 2008, my grandfather passed away. He was a very kind and loving man, and naturally, I was devastated. I was there with him when he passed, and in a way, I felt good knowing he wasn't alone when he went. The following year, around Christmas, I was spending a weekend at my Nana's house. I was at her home by myself, and I didn't feel like going out with my dad and Nana to a children's Christmas function where my dad was playing Father Christmas. I was on the phone with a former boyfriend, and at the time, my Nana didn't own a cordless phone yet. I tended to pace around while I was on the phone. I was sitting on a chair facing the window that showed the majority of the long driveway, and then leading to the garage where my granddad's workshop used to be. I was chatting away, and then stopped dead in my tracks, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flash of pure white hair and a blue flannel shirt walk past the window and toward the garage. It happened within a couple of seconds, but I was sure of what I'd seen. I also heard no footsteps or any movement outside. My granddad's hair was pure white. Whenever he was working in the garden, he wore red or blue flannel shirts. I've seen him walk that exact path to the garage many times in my childhood. My mom's best friend's house is kind of creepy. It's very dark and has hardly any natural light. It's also a very old house. My mom's friend and her family were overseas visiting family and asked my mom to check out the house once a week or so just to make sure everything was okay, and to take the mail in. On one of those visits, my former boyfriend and I joined my mom, because it was on the way home and we were out doing something that day. We both needed to use the restroom, so he went to the outdoor toilet and I went to the one inside. Once I was done, I washed my hands and I went to open the door, but before I could touch the doorknob, I saw it physically turn. I could even hear it rattle a little, as it was one of those old wooden doorknobs. Thinking it was my boyfriend playing a joke on me, or maybe my mom also needed to use the restroom and didn't know I was in there, I tried the handle and found it was locked. I opened the door after the doorknob stopped moving, and I saw that no one was there. I found my mom in the kitchen, and then I saw out the window that my boyfriend had just walked out of the outdoor toilet himself. Both of them weren't even near that particular part of the house, and I would have heard footsteps walking away anyway. Story from David in San Jose, California. Friend's Ghost.
This is David from San Jose. First of all, I want to thank you for a wonderful show that you have. And I have to tell you that I am practically bedridden, and I contact you on Facebook sometimes and just overwhelmed with how glad I am that you have this show. Anyway, thanks for that. But I just wanted to mention a couple of experiences that I've had in the last few years. Unfortunately, I've lived a life full of paranormal activities ever since I was a kid. And through the years, I've gotten used to them. But some of them would really turn heads, my experiences, and I just want to talk about a few of them tonight. I lost my friend Robert back in March of 2003. Um, he was killed on the way home in Chico, California. He drove off a cliff, and it was said that later the reports that the sheriff took said that there must have been an animal, something that he didn't want to hit, he avoided, and he swerved off onto an embankment and was killed instantly. And the sad thing about the whole thing is that 2 weeks prior to his death, I had given him a silver chain that he had wanted for a few years, and so I had gotten it for him. And when he came over to visit, I gave it to him, and he was just so happy, And we were like brothers. I had known him since high school. Um, anyway, getting back to the story, his brother called me the next day and told me of the news, and he said that when they found him, my friend Robert, that he had been clutching on to the necklace that I had given him, and to me that was a sign that I was with him till the very end. A week later, here at home, my buddy and I were looking at TV, and this plush Snoopy doll that had been on top of the CD case for, a few years had suddenly flown across the room. It didn't fall in front of the CD case, no. It flew across the room. And there's proof, thank God, Steve was here. Anyway, so I picked it up, put it back up there. It was propped against the wall, and again, it flew across the room. So we just decided to go to sleep. So we noticed about a week after that we started having experiences here in the house. Something was kicking my computer chair, the legs. And at first it startled me, but then I got used to it, and I was saying, Robert, I know you're here. Just go back, please. Just go back. Not supposed to be here. As time went by, both Steve and I had experienced different things here in the house, but as time went by, it's like I had to get away. And so I took a cruise to Mexico with another friend of mine. While I was there in Mexico, there was this store that had souvenirs and homemade souvenirs, masks and pottery and stuff like that. So, being Latin, I purchased a few masks, and they were of demons. But it's part of our art. It's a folklore art. It's sort of like Day of the Dead. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that. But they were beautiful masks, beautifully painted. When I came home, a few weeks after unpacking, I saw the masks, so I decided to put one up on each side of the bay window that I have in my room. And then just by chance, about a week later, strange things started happening. I woke up one night smelling smoke. And the reason I knew that was because, number one, I smelled it. And number two, when something's bright, your lids are closed, but you can see the blood vessels through the lids, and it's just red. Well, I slowly opened my eyes, and the brightness was coming from fire. Believe it or not, there was a young man, 17 years old, like a hippie sort of guy, dressed in a tie-dye shirt with loose jeans, longish hair, and he was doing like this wild, it looks like he was putting a spell on me with his arms going to and fro, back and forth, up and down, and he was illuminated in fire, just engulfed in fire, just looking at me. I got up and I thought, okay, I'm dreaming. I got up and he was still there. And I called for Steve, turned on my light, and then it just diminished. The whole, I want to call it a scene, just diminished. Steve came to the room and he smelled the smoke. We checked all of the sockets and electrical sockets and outlets and everything, and outside to see if anyone's smoking. No, and I told him what happened. So anyway, so I got back to bed, and a few weeks after that, I had a friend that slept over because Steve wasn't here. He went to go visit his mom in Santa Rosa, and something was shrugging me, just poking my arm, and I woke up, and there was this tall, maybe 7-foot figure looking down at me. He was transparent. I did see his face, and it looked like a sad, monstrous face. And again, I thought, okay, I'm dreaming. But I slowly undid the covers, and I turned on my light. It was there for a minute, then it slowly diminished. The next morning, my friend Mark was sitting on my bed, and he was as pale as a ghost. And I got up at about 6:30, and I was surprised, and I said, Mark, what are you doing here? And he goes, Dave, I gotta go. I said, why? I mean, because I didn't tell him anything about what I had seen. Anyway, so things just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and that meaning lights were going off and on. I always felt that, there was something in my room. Sometimes I would smell roses, sometimes I would smell cigar smoke. A neighbor heard me talking to a friend downstairs about what was going on. After I finished talking to my friend on the phone, the neighbor came out and said, David, we're having strange things going on here. Well, to make a long story short, he was having a tall man visiting his daughters while they were sleeping. Something like a man in black. But anyway, to make a long story short, after that conversation I had with him, he moved. He and his family moved out. So it got so bad in the house that I had to call a paranormal group. And they came, and sure enough, they caught a bunch of red orbs over my bed while I was on it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I had seen entities before, but not red orbs. Were like 5 to 6 orbs just over my bed. I've got pictures of some of the orbs and some of the entities that I would like to send you eventually. But here it's going on the 10-minute mark, and I apologize for that. But all this was something that I wanted to get off my chest and send to you. But anyway, so that's my story. I've got a bunch of other stories, but I'll tell of those stories in time. But the paranormal group, their work, what they did, got the entities out. I don't know what they did in getting them out, but they were gone a few weeks after that, so they cleansed the house. Anyway, again, Lex, thanks for the good work, and I'll talk to you later.
If you'd like to hear more than the 10 free episodes that are available to you of Anything Ghost, you can join the Anything Ghost VIP group. There's a one-time membership fee, and I now accept credit cards as well as PayPal. So head on over to anythingghost.com and choose or click on the Join the VIP Group tab. You'll get the complete archives of Anything Ghost, going back to that very first show in January of 2006. That's 11 years, over 11 years, for your creepy delights. Anything Ghost VIP Group at www.anythingghost.com. Go to the Join the VIP Group tab. Story from Jan in Las Vegas, Nevada. Evil Spirit. I have had several paranormal experiences in my life of 75 years. The one I will mention here took place at a woman's house in Kansas City. She rented her upstairs as an apartment. My friend and her husband and I rented this very nice 2-bedroom apartment. The lady seemed very nice and never bothered us. One morning, as I was dressing for work, I suddenly started hemorrhaging. My friends rushed me to the hospital emergency room. The doctor found the cause and sent me home with medicine to recover from any infection. I believe that incident was directly connected with what followed. One night later, I woke up, and I felt something evil in my room. It was coming toward the bed. I was terrified, so I said a prayer, and it left my room. I went back to bed with the light on, and a religious item hanging on the door suddenly dropped to the floor. My door opened. Once again, the spirit came in the same manner. I again said a prayer, and it slowly left the room. I could sense when it turned its back on me and left the room. The next morning, as I came down the stairs to leave for work, I mentioned to the landlady that I had had an unusual experience. She responded, "Oh, him again. We'll have to have the house exorcised again." Then she chuckled. Within 24 hours, my friends and I moved to a different apartment. I have had my grandfather visit me after his death. I have walked into houses which I knew an evil spirit. Next story is from Chaz in the U.S., The White Specter. And I realize what Chaz is about to share with you sounds like what is known as sleep paralysis. I thought I'd share it anyway because it has a couple of interesting things going on. So I'm trying to pretty much remove them from anything goes, the sleep paralysis stories. But from time to time you'll get one, and I'll let you be the judge here.
Hey guys, I'm Chaz. I really love your podcast, and I wanted to share one of my stories with the paranormal, and I hope you enjoy this. So, this story apparently has happened to many people, but slightly different in mine. It all started in a dream of mine. I was dreaming, but it wasn't a normal dream. I had my eyes open, and I was dreaming at the same time. I know that's weird, but I was in my bedroom at my old house in Grays Lake, Illinois, and I was very tired the night before, and I guess sleep deprivation could do this to you, but I know what I was dreaming had some influence on me. So, yeah, a little backstory for this story begins with me and all my close friends in mourning, because one of our very close friends in our group had died before this paranormal experience happened. So anyway, I was dreaming with my eyes open. I couldn't move a muscle. I started getting these dreams or visions of my doorknob just shaking violently. I got scared, and I started calling out the name of my dead friend, and I started panicking in my dream. I got up in my dream. Once again, this was in my dream, and I guess in the physical world, I could not move. So I got up in my dream, and I tried holding the doorknob and putting my weight of my body onto the door to prevent whatever was on the other side from coming in. Also, I could not breathe. Yeah, I said that, but yeah, my breathing stopped. It was my breathing stopped, and it felt like I was being choked. I kept calling my friend's name, and all of a sudden the doorknob just stopped shaking. I opened the door, and it was a man dressed in a white suit and a white hat as well, and he told me to stay asleep and that everything was going to be okay. I didn't know what to think or feel, but suddenly my breathing came back, and I could twitch my toes to try to get my body to wake itself up. I tried so hard to wake up after that, and eventually I did. I felt really scared when I woke up, and but at the same time I was relieved. I also couldn't recognize the man because of the white glow he had around him. Yeah, so there's this white glow around the man. It's almost if it was like some, like the stereotypical angel you'd see. So yeah, I felt safe around him though. So yeah, that was one of my stories, and I just wanted to get your guys' input on my experience, as well as the viewers, if they want to, call and, have something else to say. I'd love to learn more about this because, as I've said, there's many stories of this white man and, in a white suit. So, yeah, my friend, he was the person I think I saw him in my dream. I think that was him. I couldn't really tell because of the white glow. But before he died, he was acting very strange, but not in a bad way. It was a good way. He was like happy, full of life, and always like helping others. Yeah. So anyways, thanks for listening to my story, and I'll definitely call in or tell you my other stories, because I have many stories, but this was my most recent story, most recent paranormal experience. So yeah, thanks for listening, and bye.
Okay, this is a creepy experience. It's from Nissim in New Delhi, India. Rebecca. This incident took place at a boarding school I went to. I was new there, and so were most of my classmates. It was a Christian institution, and so our teachers and wardens were very strict, and the students were not allowed to be in possession of money, and most importantly, gadgets. Because of this very reason, most students would sneak cell phones and use them secretly in their dorms. In our girls' dormitories, the number of students who were secretly in possession of cell phones was increasing, and the warden was growing suspicious. One evening, she announced that she knew about all the girls who kept money and cell phones, and that it would be better for them to surrender, or else suspected rooms would get raided at night, and it would be worse if they were caught. Weeks passed. The warden had caught a few girls, but my roommates and I didn't keep phones, so our lives were pretty smooth. One particular night, I had a dream. I was standing in my room, and it was full of light. I saw one of my classmates named Daisy. She was sitting in the bottom bunk of my bed. She was just staring at the bed that was opposite to mine. I looked over, and I saw a woman whose figure appeared to be quite blurry, but I can tell you that she was a woman, and that I swear I had never seen her in my life. She had long, curly black hair. She wore something like a white summer dress. This woman and Daisy were staring at each other, and I at them. Suddenly, the room filled with more light, and I woke up from my dream. I didn't really know what to think about it then, and I went back to sleep. A few weeks later, it was Saturday, and we all went to bed quite early since we had to attend church in the morning. Suddenly, in the dead of the night, I heard the door of the next room to ours slammed hard against the walls. All four of us got up. It was very irritating. Why would anyone do that at 3:30 in the morning? We thought we should go out and see, but for some reason, none of us dared. We glued our ears to the door. The warden had come, and she was furious. She was shrieking. We thought maybe it was one of those raids, and the girls who were caught were making a ruckus. After a while, we heard the rest of the staff rushing in, and to our surprise, we heard them all praying. And not just praying, they were carrying out an exorcism. Now that's bizarre, we said to ourselves. All of a sudden, the lights went out. After a while, we heard someone pushing and throwing the furniture in the study hall that is one floor below ours. It was pretty scary, since the lights were out and someone was throwing chairs around in the study hall. But at least we had the feeling of being safe from whoever or whatever was out there while we were locked in our rooms. The lights came back on, and everything went silent. We could hear our warden roaming around the corridors as she carries a bunch of keys and makes jingling sounds, so we knew she was out there. In about 5 minutes or so, we heard her going back to her room. We then decided to go out and find out what happened. It was weird to see that no one had come out of their rooms. How could anyone have slept through all of that? The four of us went to the next room, where everything had happened. We asked them what was going on. What they told us scared my roommates, but it kind of shook me to the core. because it had to do with the dream I had had. The girl Daisy that I had dreamed of had gone berserk. They had all been chatting that night, and Daisy had randomly started talking about a girl that she could see, and her name was Rebecca. They told us that Daisy described Rebecca as having long, curly black hair. She wore a white dress. They didn't understand what she was talking about, and she became quite aggressive and ran out of the room agitated, slamming the door hard at the wall, and you know the rest of the story. The caretakers had taken her away for the night. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. It was unsettling to think that something like that had happened. I never told anyone. Daisy was nowhere to be seen the next day. However, she was back in her room that evening. Her behavior had changed. She acted weirdly. She kept talking about this girl, Rebecca, who was invisible to the rest of us. At school the next day, she wouldn't shut up during class, so her friends took her to the infirmary and left her with some snacks. When it was lunchtime, we went to see her. She was sitting on a bed, and for some reason, she had 3 biscuits on the floor. When asked, she said they were for Rebecca. She had become very, very strange. The next day, right after school, she was taken to church again. She came back late, free of Rebecca, and even her memories of Rebecca no longer remained. This short incident was quite unbelievable to everyone at the school, and as time passed, everyone eventually forgot about it. Daisy claims that she doesn't remember anything about it. No one believed it to be true, and they all said that Daisy was lying all along trying to seek attention, since she had been that kind of person. It had become a joke. They would sometimes tease her by calling her Rebecca, but she would act as if she didn't know why. But I believe something did happen to her, because I saw Rebecca even before this all began. Here's a story from Jolie in Washington. Seattle's Alabi Room.
Hello everyone, this is Jolie, and I would like to share with you 2 happy ghost stories. So the first ghost story I'd like to share is when I lived in downtown Seattle, and this was early 2000s, and I would spend a lot of my weekend time, my brunch time, if you will, going to the Alabi Room, and I quite enjoyed the brunch. I enjoyed sitting there, drinking coffee and reading my book on a Saturday and Sunday morning-ish, and I did that for years. But there was one time in particular that I was finishing up, and I decided to use the restroom before I was going to leave. And the restroom, even out of all the years that I spent there, the restrooms always made me uncomfortable. The Alabi Room, if you're unfamiliar with the place, it is located in kind of the heart of Seattle's Pike Place Market. And the Alabi Room is now one of the places that is involved in a ghost hunt tour. At the time, there was no such thing in existence, but it's a pretty popular place. But the bathrooms are, they're even though the Alabi Room is in kind of the underground of Seattle, the bathrooms are still yet another story plus, definitely feels like story plus, underground, in-ground kind of place, and it's a rather uncomfortable and not friendly area to go to. On this particular day, it was pretty regular. I just marched over to the stairwell leading down into the deep dark depths of the lonely, desolate bathrooms. So as I turned the corner to go down the stairs, I see there's a man standing at the bottom of the stairwell. And this is weird. This is very weird. Like the basement of the Alabi room is already not occupied during the day, but why is there was this man in a suit, slick back hair, great big smile on his face, just standing at the base of this stairwell. And I'm walking down, and we have this eye contact, and all I'm thinking is, like, what is this dude doing down here? This is weird. Even though he's, like, friendly and inviting enough, like, everything about this is very strange. So as I get closer to the base of the stairs, I get much closer to him, and I'm about to round the corner to go to the women's restroom. He asks me, he's like, "Hello, can I help you with anything?" And I say, nope, just going to the restroom. And I put my thumb over to the left. I'm like, I'm going this way. That's all right. Got this all on my own. And around the corner, I use the restroom. I come out, and he's gone. And I think absolutely nothing of it for 10 years. Easily 10 years, possibly 11. At that time, my friends asked me to join them on a ghost tour of Pike Place Market. And I joined them, and very early on this ghost tour, we end up in the basement of the Alabi room. And I'm finding everything, like, what are we doing down here? Like, oh, I haven't been to this place for years, and what, it's haunted kind of thing? And so the ghost tour guide begins by saying, like, the most common spirit that they see down here is a man, a finely dressed man, slick back hair, big smile on his face, and he asks you if he can help you with anything. And suddenly, 10 years came right back. Like that 1 minute, maybe minute and a half of my life that I had totally forgotten about came right back, and I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I met this ghost. Like, he was apparently a ghost. So yeah, I had an encounter with a ghost, and I didn't even realize it until 10 years later. And apparently this ghost, according to the tour guide, is supposed to be one of the founders of the Pike Place Market. He was very protective of the market. He loved the market, and he had an office not too far, and he loved everything about it. And so it didn't surprise me too much that he might haunt some areas, particularly this place. But it really blew my mind that I ran into him, and he asked me if he could assist me with anything, and I had no idea it was a ghost. I just thought it was part of regular weird Seattle, but apparently not. So also the tour guide added that the spirit has not been seen in many years. And so I hope he has moved on. I really hope he has moved on. But if as far as a ghost kind of goes, he was kind of one of the happiest, cheeriest ones I could think of you could ever encounter. And so that is my first story. My second story has kind of two small stories wrapped up in one. So also not based in Seattle, but out not too far out of Seattle. And about 5 years ago, I went over to the islands of Washington State to be a part of an art convention weekend kind of festival art class event, a huge event that took place on inside of an old fort along our islands, not too far from Port Townsend, Washington. A pretty famous fort, and most of it is still intact. The officers' quarters, the barracks, everything. It's a stunning, beautiful place. And I had the privilege of being assigned a room in the one of the long barracks quarters, turn of the century barracks quarters. My friend and I were given a room there, and our room was located underneath one of the staircases. And I love these events. I've been to them for many years, but this was the last year I was a part of it for multiple reasons. But we get into our room, we start unpacking all of our art supplies, and we're just so excited for the next day for our classes and everything. And I open up a dresser drawer, and somebody had written in Sharpie, black Sharpie, "This room is haunted." And I look at my roommate, my friend, I'm looking at this Sharpie, and we laugh, like belly laugh kind of thing. I was like, I believe in spirits, of course, but a Sharpie, black Sharpie pen in a dresser drawer in a romantic old barracks, like it was just too silly for me to even pay attention to. And so I should have paid attention to it, but I did not. Instead, I put my art supplies in there and totally forgot about it. Until about the middle of the night, I wake up suddenly. Well, I think suddenly. I wake up because I hear non-stop stomping up and down the stairs in the hallway. There's people talking, and it's loud, and it honest to goodness sounds like hundreds of people are going up and down the stairs above our room. They're walking back and forth in front of our dorm, our barracks room, if you will. It sounds like it should be like 8:30 in the morning, and it is pitch black outside. And my first thought was like, why are so many people so excited about art classes tomorrow? Like I really can't even put the two and two together. I'm like, it's still dark out. It's probably like 3-4 o'clock in the morning. This is madness. When I have to use the restroom anyway, and this is turning into an oddly restroom story. Anyway, I have to get up, and I'm like, I'm just going to go out and use the restroom. I'm going to see what all this madness is going on in the hallway. And I open up the door, and it is nothing. There's nothing. These hallways, they're wide and long, and they're pitch black. And there's nobody on the stairwell. There is nothing happening. It is silent. And all my alarms are kind of going off, like, retreat, there's something seriously wrong here, but I also have to use the restroom. So I run as fast as I can down the hall to the bathroom, and I run all the way back as fast as I can to my barracks room, and I jump in bed and probably throw the covers over my head and try to go back to sleep. I do go back to sleep, but when I wake up the next morning, I look at my roommate, my friend, and I say, "Did you happen to hear anything last night?" And she's like, "Oh gosh, well, there's people going up and down the stairs and in the hallway. They were so loud." And right then I realized I was not crazy. This is fantastic. I was like, man, I heard them. I heard them too, and there actually was absolutely nobody out there. So we had a good 15-20 minutes talk about how we're both not crazy, and there's something seriously crazy going on. But on our last night there, I had a room in our barracks to myself just for a moment. I was on the phone with my siblings who were making a special trip over to the islands to tour, and we're going to go out to dinner. It's also one of my siblings' birthdays, and so he just wanted to do something special for his birthday. And I'm in the barracks room by myself, and I'm on my cell phone, and I say to my brother, I was like, "Oh, by the way, happy birthday! Happy birthday! I'm excited to see you." And there was a moment of silence, and we hear, "Happy birthday!" And we've got another moment of silence, and I say to my brother, I was like, who is that? And he says to me, "No, who was that?" I was like, that was nobody you knew? He's like, "No, I thought that was on your side." We went back and forth, and he thought it was somebody in my room shouting it, and I thought it was somebody who jumped over his shoulder and shouted it into the phone. the best conclusion that I have, and this is what I told my brother, I was like, you just got the most excited birthday wish I've ever heard from a soldier from the grave, by the way. And my poor brother was not very comfortable with this, though I thought it was an absolute treat. Like, when in the way that the happy birthday was delivered as well, it was just such a guttural but really happy voice. It was a male voice, very deep, but it was somebody who just could barely contain their excitement, is what I heard. And so I tried to show that to my brother. I'm like, what a wonderful gift. This is so fantastic. And my brother's like, change the subject. I'll meet you for dinner later. I'm like, okay. But and so that was the end of that. That was the end of my ghost stories at this fort. I haven't been to the fort for a couple years now, but all right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And as always, thank you, Lex, for every wonderful thing you do. And I wish everyone a good evening, and take care.
And as promised, at the beginning of the show, I said I was going to read a story from my book that came out last year. It's called Anything Ghost Volume 1, Ghostly and Creepy Experiences. It's available in print or in ebook format. Just look for the title. And the story I'm going to read is from, it was originally out in show number 160 in August of 2012. I include that information in the book as well. The story's called Is Emily a Ghost? From Alex in New York. I currently live with my fiancée and her 5-year-old daughter, Jolie. I have lived there with them for the past 3 or 4 years. Prior to our current home, we lived in an apartment in another area close to where we live now. We never really thought about the apartment much. It seemed fairly modern to us, and we never had any uneasy feelings while living there. However, after the first year, my fiancé's daughter, who was about 3 or 4 at the time, began talking to an imaginary friend named Emily. Since we both believe in the paranormal and how susceptible children are to it, we began to keep in mind whenever Jolie would talk about or play with Emily. It soon got to the point that not a day would go by without Jolie mentioning Emily. Finally, one day while we were driving, I asked Jolie jokingly, "All right, Jolie, I'm just going to throw this out there. Is Emily a ghost?" She laughed and said, "No, she's my friend." Immediately after her response, a cow appeared in the middle of the road, causing me to violently jerk the wheel into the oncoming lane. Now, this may have just been a coincidence, and we ended up chalking it up to that, until we began noticing other strange things happening at that apartment. One night, while we were all asleep, I woke up to an icy cold pressure pushing on the tip of my nose. I reached for my fiancée to see if she was playing a trick on me, but she was fast asleep. I even checked her hands to see if maybe she had accidentally touched me while she was moving, but her hands were warm. Another night I was watching TV in the living room when my fiancée nervously called me into the bedroom. I walked in and saw the TV on, but nothing out of the ordinary. She said she was sleeping when all of a sudden the TV turned on by itself. This began to happen quite often after that. One time, while I was sitting in the living room, out of the corner of my eye, I saw who I thought was my fiancé walk into the bedroom, turn on the light, and begin to put laundry away. Or so I thought. After a while, I called to her and asked her if she needed any help, since it seemed like she was taking longer than usual. She asked me what I was talking about. However, her voice was not coming from the bedroom. My fiancé was in the kitchen and said she had not been in there the entire time. Perhaps the most interesting incident happened late one night when I heard Jolie making a strange noise in her bedroom. I rushed into the room and found her crying, gasping for air, and with a very unusual cough. She was crying and saying her chest was hurting. It turned out to be croup cough, which I had never heard of before this incident. That being said, I ran into my bedroom to wake up my fiancée and tell her that I needed help. After we calmed Jolie down and put her back to bed, she told me that right before I burst through the door, she saw a little girl in a white dress with blonde hair open the door with a look of surprise and worry on her face. To this day, we both believe that it was Emily trying to warn her friend that she was in trouble. After these incidents began occurring, I did a little research on the building. Though our apartment seemed to be very modern, the home itself was built in the late 1800s. Unfortunately, this was the extent of my findings. However, the history itself explained a lot. One last quick story about Jolie. This doesn't involve her ghostly counterpart. However, it is still quite interesting. Last summer, when she was about 4 and we were staying at a hotel on vacation, we had just tucked her into bed, read her stories, and said goodnight. She replied, "Okay, I'm going to die now." Shocked, we both told her that was not a nice thing to say and that she should not repeat it. In a nonchalant tone, she replied, "Oh, I was just joking. Besides, I would just go up to heaven anyways." Mind you, we are not a religious family, and up until this point, we had not really discussed such things with her. Nevertheless, her comment was both intriguing and freaky at the same time. We asked her how she knew this, and she continued, "Well, that's what happened last time. Gerald came down and took the stone off my head, and then we both flew up to heaven." We began to ask about Gerald, and she answered, "Oh, he's the one that helped me get to heaven. He's got wings. I stayed up there for a while, then I decided to come back down here and live with you guys." After composing ourselves, we again said goodnight, and we all went to sleep. On the way home, we drove past a cemetery, and Jolie said excitedly, "That's one of the stones," pointing to his tombstone. "That's the kind of stone he helped get off my head." She would also talk about her old family and how she had children who did not want her, so they kicked her out. She also stated that she had to bury one of them, as well as her mother. Though the frequency of her comments about her past lives has diminished, she still occasionally will mention them. And that's all we have for Anything Ghost number 234. If you have a story you want to share, a personal experience with the paranormal, or a local ghost legend, send them to lex@anythingghost.com, or go to anythingghost.com and fill out the contact form and send your story in that way. And for everything Anything Ghost, go to www.anythingghost.com. And don't forget to check out the Join the VIP group so you can get access to the complete archives of Anything Ghost. Have yourself a great week, everyone, and take care.